Well, hello. It is 7 o'clock on Sunday evening. Thank you, Lord, for another day that we can all come together and we can talk about your word and share with each other how we have been growing in it and have a little chat about what we've been getting from Esther this week. So, hello, Michelle. Happy Mother's Day. Mother's Day to you, too. Hope your children hugged you and told you how much they appreciate you today. But I will say, I hope they do that every day. That is not something that should be reserved for one day out of the year. My children have blessed me today and made it a very nice day and laid back day, which is my favorite kind of thing. So that has all worked out great, and this is a good culmination of all of that for me, for us to end this way. So I'm going to let everybody get a few minutes to jump on, kind of get my ducks lined out here. This week you've been focused in chapters 6 and 7, if you're following along with our plan. If you're not there yet, just remember, you're not really behind. Wherever you started this study, just take it a little bit every day and see what you can learn from it. You don't have to stick to our schedule, and I don't want you to feel pressured to catch up. Bible study is an ongoing thing that you're going to do as long as you're on this earth, if you're interested in serving the Lord, and you're really not ever behind. You're where you are because everything you read and study comes to you and is open to you from where your perspective is. You can learn things from other people, and we're supposed to do that, but you're not behind because you're not where somebody else is in the journey, right? It's your journey. Jesus tells several parables about that in the New Testament, about how you could have come to labor early, or you could have come to labor late in your life, and everybody's going to get the same reward because they came and they labored and they accepted the circumstances that the Master gave them. So you're not behind, and we all need to remember that. You're walking your path with the Lord, and you just have to do what you know how to do and work to grow in grace and knowledge. And you are not in a competition with me or anybody else. It's just about taking more in so that each day you can do a little more so that you can just continue to serve God better. So, again, hello, Catherine. Happy Mother's Day to you, too. Thank you for being here. So, okay. We left off last week in our story at the end of chapter 5. Esther had been made aware of the evil plan of Haman. Mordecai let her know what was going on. And Mordecai told her that he really thought it was her responsibility to say something to the king, because she was in a position to do this. And he believed that while he knew God could preserve them any way God wanted to, this just might be a way that God intended for the people to be preserved. So Esther and all of the Jews fasted for 3 days in preparation to support her, to make sure that they were not just doing this on their own, they're not being retaliatory, they're not moving out of fear, they're showing some trust in God, right? If they're taking 3 days and focusing their time and effort on talking to God about this. Now, we have to assume that that's who they're talking to, and that's what the purpose of the fasting is, because the author of the book doesn't say. But in many other scriptures in the New Testament that deal with fasting, always connects prayer with fasting. And God recommends fasting in several different instances, and the New Testament writers even mention fasting. So it's always connected with giving a very focused attention to talking to God about what's going on in that moment. It's not something that's done every day. It's not, this is something it's for a special event kind of thing. And so that's how they treat it. So I think it's safe to say that that's how they are using it here, that they are taking 3 days to help Esther and to pray for her and to pray for the lives of the whole nation, and to hope that this is going to come about in a result that will save all of the Jews. So she comes to the determination that she is going to go before the king. She puts her life on the line for everyone. She goes to visit the king. She walks up. He sees her. He reaches out and welcomes her. And he's immediately concerned. What's wrong with her? Because obviously she wouldn't be here unless something was concerning her. And he's eager to tell her whatever she wants. He wants to give her what she's asking for. And in her wisdom, Esther doesn't just jump right in to the problem. She invites the king and Haman to come to dinner that day. She has prepared a meal. It's waiting for them. And she's asked him if he is willing, if he is agreeable, if he would not mind coming and allowing Haman to come as well. The king jumps at the chance to go have dinner with her, and I'm sure to see what's going on, and he calls for Haman and said, let's go. We need to be in a hurry, and we're going to go and eat dinner with the queen. So we left off last week. They've had dinner once, and she didn't tell him what it was about, but she asked for him to come back. And the end of the chapter was Haman going home and gloating about all of the attention he's been given, but also whining because of the thorn in his side named Mordecai, who just will not acknowledge Haman's authority and will not bow down to him. And it just ruined everything. Ruined his whole day because Mordecai would not do this. And the lovely friends that Haman has surrounding him and his wife advised him that the obvious answer to his problem is to build gallows and to have Mordecai killed. It's the natural thing to do in this case. And Mordecai likes it. Mordecai is just doing his thing, and Haman likes this idea, right? He's excited. Mordecai, again, we talked about last week, showing no indication. I mean, he knows what Haman's done. He shows no indication of any fear of Haman, even with all of this plan that's been set in motion and we know cannot be undone just outright. So that put us in chapter 6. And so this week we were in 6 and 7. And, you know, I would love in the comments, tell me what your impression was as you're writing this out. Most of us are familiar with this story, so we knew what to expect, but as you were writing it out, did anything stand out to you? Because you wrote out the entirety of chapter 6 and chapter 7 this week. And this is all taking place on the same day. This all starts after the king and Haman have dinner with the queen. They go home. The king can't sleep that night. And here he is, he's awake, and he's like, okay, I can't go to sleep, so obviously I called for, why don't you come read me the Chronicles of the Kings, and so maybe that'll make me sleepy and go to sleep. And so they're reading to him from the Chronicles, and the king discovers that Mordecai protected the king. He learns about this event that we read about, I think, back in chapter 2, where Mordecai learned about this plot against the king, and he protected the king and brought an end to the plot. And the king's concern is, has anything ever been done for Mordecai? The servants tell him, no, nothing's ever been done. Well, just about that time, here comes Haman. He got up really early this morning because he wants to talk to the king about building this gallows and hanging Mordecai on the gallows. A little coincidental that that's what he's wanting to do, and yet the king's having a completely different thought process about Mordecai. So Haman walks in. The servants say, here's Haman, ask him what's a good idea, what to do to honor Mordecai. Well, the king asks Haman what should be done for someone whom the king wants to honor. And, Haman, in all of his humility, thought, well, who else would he want to honor more than me? I mean, right? Oh, poor Haman, right? He just sets himself up for a fall, right? He just opens the door and walks right through it. So, this has got to be for me. So he comes up with this grand plan. You're going to put him on this horse, and you're going to dress him in all these special things, and you're going to put this crown on his head, and then somebody's going to walk him around the city and declare how wonderful this man is and how much he wants to be honored, how much the king wants to honor him. And so he takes it and he arrays him, and he has to do this for this man. And the shock of the moment is when the king says, that's a brilliant idea. Go do that for Mordecai. So Haman's come in this morning with every intent to get the king to allow him to kill Mordecai. And then the king says, oh wait, it's Mordecai that I want you to honor. Haman's all wrapped up. He just knows he's going to get this honor, and this is all going to be good. Mordecai's going to be dead. He's going to get praised by the king. And then the king's like, oh, wait, no. This is Mordecai. I want you to take Mordecai and do all of these wonderful things for him, and I want you to do it. It wasn't for Haman to give to anybody else. Haman needed to do this. And so Haman has to walk his abject enemy, this man that he despises, around and declare how wonderful he is and how much the king is praising him. And when this is all done, I find it interesting that there's very little said about how Mordecai reacted to any of this. Obviously, he acquiesced to the everything being done to him. He participated in it, but it just isn't. He just went back to the king's gate. He went back to his job. Just went back to his job. But Haman turned home mourning with his head covered. So Haman is distraught at what has happened. And now it's time. They're calling. It's time to go have dinner. Day is gone. It is time to go eat with the queen again. And Haman is just sick, but he's got to go eat dinner. Riley mentioned, look, Facebook is letting me see comments. Reading and writing through it this time really struck me that in chapter 6, Haman walks into the king expecting to get Mordecai hung on the gallows and ends up leading him on a parade to honor him. What a lesson. Yeah, in pride and humility. And even though he has accomplished the edict against the Jews, doesn't it just seem a little outrageous that he felt certain that he could convince the king to just allow a man to be killed? I mean, what reason is he going to give, right? And this lends a little bit more also to my thought that we talked about initially when Mordecai didn't bow down to him, that Mordecai was not actually going against the law in what he did. Because if Haman had a leg to stand on to kill him, there wouldn't have been all of this stuff going on. He would have just eliminated him. He took it so far in an effort to be sure that he could deal with Mordecai. And maybe it's just his hatred was that deep and that it just wasn't enough to deal with Mordecai. I don't know. But he expected just to be able to walk in and, just say, hey, he's going to be dead. And then to be so full of himself to think of this grand plan because he thought he could see himself receiving all of that treatment. And I love the perspective of how this is written. This being written from a third party, I think, who's watching all of these things. There's going to be another reference in here in chapter 7 at the end, whenever the king is, after all these things happen, and he mentions, and there's another eunuch who is named. Well, what he actually does is pretty small, but there's all of these eunuchs named, and so it really makes me wonder if the person who penned this wasn't one of the eunuchs in the king's household, who was aware of Esther, knew who she was, knew of her story, and telling all of this. It would make sense that as a Persian, he wouldn't tell the story from a Jew's perspective, but he's watching all of these things. So it's interesting. And I want to take note that at the end of chapter 6, Oh, wait, let's see. Haley has something. I had never before caught the words of Haman's friends and wife when he gets back from honoring Mordecai. Yes. How much of a downer it must have been when they said, you don't have a chance against this guy. Right, because what did they say yesterday? You're the be-all, end-all. You can just go have him declared that he needs to die, right? And they very much think so. And I find it interesting. They say, if Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of Jewish origin, they connect who Mordecai is, and they say, if that's who he is, you will not overcome him, but will surely fall before him. They're starting to connect some dots, like, okay, there is some reason why this man keeps prevailing over Haman. And this was a big show. This was a very big shaming to Haman. Of course, nobody else but Haman and his friends and family know this. But for them, for where they saw Haman yesterday to where he is now, after this walking and parading of Mordecai, yes, it's a huge knocking his feet out from under him, and so thoroughly. I'm so impressed with how thorough God is with this. He has set this up. This man is so completely full of himself, and God doesn't just tweak it a little bit. He completely deals with it. Riley also says, Esther's decision to ask them to a second banquet always kind of confused me before. But reading it this time, it seems like Haman's demeanor and state of mind might have had a lot to do with her decision about her timing. At the first banquet, he's feeling pretty high and mighty, but at the second, he's been taken down a notch. Yes. Yeah, which is a fair thing to consider, right? If he's sitting here preening and having good conversation with the king, and he's enjoying himself, and he's certainly not going to be receptive to what she has to say, and might even make it harder for her to get her argument made. But how perfectly does God's providence take care of that, right? Because how's she going to get Haman's attention? She's going to get his attention by these events of the day. He is going to be a much more subdued man coming to dinner and caught off his guard. His attention is focused on Mordecai and what has happened to in that situation. He's not thinking big picture. He is thinking right here. This is what's going on. And so, yeah, I think she's paid attention. She's taken in and going, okay, why don't y'all come back tomorrow? And the king is eager to do that. Haman's all excited, and then get to the end of the day, and he's had a bad day. But now he has to go to dinner. So he goes to dinner, and it's pretty quick. They come to dinner, and they drank their wine at the banquet, and the king says, all right, tell me what is going on. And he repeats it again, up to half my country. You can have it. He wants to give her what she's asking for. He just needs to know what it is. He is eager to please her. And Esther says, if I have found favor in your sight, and if it pleases the king, let my life be given as my petition, and my people as my request. She doesn't lay out this political argument in front of him. She tells him, my life is in danger. Someone has threatened me. Insert your wife, your queen here, right? The queen has been threatened, and all of my people. And the king, and she makes, before I go there, before she makes that, I love too that she acknowledges that since he has these people here as slaves, she acknowledges that if they had just been shifted to another master, just sold into slavery somewhere else, she wouldn't say anything. But this is a problem because their lives have been threatened. Not just that they're going to be moved to another hand, but that they're being sought to be destroyed and to be annihilated. And she says, I wouldn't have bothered you with this. that would have been an annoyance to just come, because it's what she says, just because it didn't make me happy wasn't enough. This is life and death. And so this is serious. She lays out in a very simple, straightforward way an argument that is going to be hard for him to argue with. He's not going to be trying to go, now that's just all political stuff that you don't know anything about. She makes it clear this is personal and it's big. It's not just me. It includes me, but it's not just me. It's all of my people. And the king asks, who's done this? Who would presume to do this? Okay? Now, this also shows the king has not picked up on in these 5 years that she's a Jew. He doesn't know that, and another indication that the Jews are just really entrenched, right? Haman doesn't declare to the king who they are. He just says there's these people and they have different laws, and they don't, they live by different laws than by your laws, and they're kind of causing a problem, so we need to get rid of them. And the king just says, okay. But he doesn't there's nothing for him to make a connection to the queen for that. But he sees in her description that there was a presumption of this grand idea going on, plus including the queen. And Esther, just as plain as day, just says, a foe and an enemy is this wicked Haman. She says it's Haman, right here. And Haman is terrified. And I can just picture now, he's already come to dinner broken and miserable because this day, the way that it has gone. He has been brought low. He doesn't know how to turn things around. His family has no hope for him because they are recognizing that Mordecai has the upper hand because of who he is and what nation he belongs to. And I think there you can insert whose God he follows, right? If he is of the Jewish nation, they follow a different God. God is with them. He's got all of these things and he just can't figure it out, right? Well, now we've got that moment. I told y'all to look for a change in the king. Did you see a difference in King Ahasuerus right here? I think God chooses to show us the king reacts differently after he's been drinking here than he did back in chapter 1. Okay? And it says in verse 6, the king arose in his anger from drinking wine. So he has a problem with his emotions when he's been drinking. It makes him very angry, right? But instead of reacting right then the way that he did in chapter 1 with Vashti, he gets up and he leaves the room. He goes out into the garden. And the implication, I think, is to cool off. He is going to get control of himself. And what an amazing arc that is for him. I think God is showing us that he learned from that, and he appreciated that, okay, I need to be in more control of myself. So he goes out to cool off, but then Haman stays to beg for his life from the queen. Oh, wow. She's just declared that you are trying to kill her, and now you're going to beg her to save your life? That's audacious enough. But he already knows that the king is determined to kill him. He knows what's coming. He knows how the king handles these things. He knows what he's done. Can't be justified. But so the king returns from the palace garden into the place where they were drinking wine, and Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was. So he has fallen over the couch. I can just imagine she's sitting here on her cushions, and he is on the floor at her knees, fawning over her, just begging for his life. Not showing any respect for the queen in that you should keep your distance. Hands off. Don't touch. None of that. Haman's concern is only about Haman, and he shows no respect to the king and no respect to the queen. And the king walks in. He sees him falling on her like that, And he says, will he even assault the queen with me in the house? Not only will he do this to the queen and to these people, he will not show me any honor while he's here with me. He sees the problem. And as the word went out of the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. The servants know. Get this man out of the room, and covering his face shows his life is going to be taken. So one of the eunuchs, who was here before the king, and he sees all of this, and he just happens to stand up and share this information. Behold, the gallows standing at Haman's house, 50 cubits high, which Haman made for Mordecai, who spoke good on behalf of the king. There's gallows at Haman's house. He wanted to kill Mordecai. He's just laying it on, right? And the king says, kill him on it. And they take Haman away and they hang him on the gallows. So within a 24-hour time span, Haman's life has absolutely done a 180. All those things that he took pride in, all of those things that he was so sure of. Just this one little problem, just Mordecai. Mordecai is in his life, right? And he's just sure of all these other things that should be his. And he's proven wrong. And all of it is taken away. It makes me think of the man in the New Testament in the parable, this rich man who has so much from his fields that he builds bigger barns and just goes, oh, look, I'm set now. And what does God tell him? Your life is going to be required of you. And you don't get to take anything with you. He put all of his faith in these things. And it was all about him. It was all these things that he had done. And God reminded him, those things don't belong to you. Not fully. You only get them because God allows it. And in Haman's case, he didn't get any of that. His family is then also affected. There's trickle down here. His family is going to be punished as well for what Haman did. And I think rightly so, because they were encouraging his behavior. But what a difference. So we've got 2 chapters, covers just one day, right? We go from one dinner to the next dinner. In the middle of the day, we have all these events where Mordecai is held up. And Mordecai in his humility just goes back to work. And there's no indication that he made anything more miserable for Haman. Haman's just miserable. But God's providence set all this in motion. And as we've mentioned, having that second dinner allowed for a change in Haman's position that also strengthened Esther's position. So I think it shows God's hand in all of this, right? But look at how Esther approaches this. In our wisdom, if any of us were in a situation where we learn that our family has been targeted and they are going to be destroyed in so much time, what would our first instinct be? What would be the first thing that we would think to do to go to the authorities to ask for something in the regards of help for that? Is the first thing that we would think of be to make them feel comfortable and to show them honor and to spend our time showing them respect and honor and appreciating who they are before we get to the point? What are we going to be most worried about? What are we going to be most fearful about? Esther shows us what happens when you take some time and give your problems to God first, because I believe without question that that's what she did in those 3 days of fasting. This is a young woman who has been taught by Mordecai to trust in God. And Mordecai has shown a great deal of faith. And the two of them together in this effort, they go to fasting for this and they encourage the people around them. And guess what? she is able to walk into this moment, carry herself with a lot of calm, but to be able to clearly state what the problem is, but not make it teary and emotional and overwhelming. She didn't make it hard to understand. She just got the king's attention, and then she stated the facts plainly, but she made sure that she did so in a way. He's being very receptive to her personally. So she made this about her, personal. My life has been threatened, and I would hope that you care enough about me that you want to protect me, and I would ask that you would protect my people. And she has the wisdom to acknowledge that if it was really just an exchange of goods, which at that time the slaves would have been, right? That she would not have had any right to say anything. She acknowledges that with him. All of those things, to his mind, have to show a clarity of thought on her part. It also shows an honor that she is showing him. She's not trying to just waste his time. She's not asking for something trivial. She's not just being emotional and out of control. She is in control of herself. This is a serious situation, and he responds to the way she says it in like manner. And to show us the little bits about his growth and that now he's more serious. He could have lashed out. He had the right to lash out and kill Haman. There's nothing wrong with him deciding to kill Haman. But the fact that he didn't make that decision in haste just because he's drunk and he got mad, he takes a minute to go be calm, and as he comes back and wants to handle it calmly, Haman takes the decision out of his hands because Haman is not behaving calmly. And it just, all right, we're just going to deal with this because Haman obviously does not have respect for the king, and he doesn't have respect for the queen. And I believe, too, that the king shows that Haman's lack of respect for Esther was a lack of respect for the king. She was the king's. She's his. Haman should not have felt so free as to paw at her and to grab at her to try to get her attention to save his life. He should have kept his own self-control in hand and dealt with it appropriately if there was an argument to be made. But he didn't. And so God handles this situation beautifully and sets us up for the next part. The king knows what's going on. Haman has been destroyed. So we've gotten part 1 dealt with. So the next thing that has to be dealt with is what we're going to look at this week. And so this week, you're reading chapter 8 today, and you will spend the week just writing chapter 8. And then Saturday, you will read chapter 9. And these 2 chapters, the first one deals with the process of dealing with this law that is outstanding to allow the people in Persia to kill the Jews, not just allow them, to encourage them to do so, and to destroy all of them. And we will see throughout this next chapter how much more the king shows a different attitude towards this queen than he did towards Vashti. And it's not even just a deference given to her. Esther and Mordecai are both given a great deal of authority. He doesn't just give this to Mordecai, he gives it to Esther. And she is going to be held up, and she is going to be the one implementing all of these corrections. She's going to be right in the middle of it. Everything's going to be handled correctly, but the king is going to hand her the power that actually Haman had before. Mordecai is going to get it directly, but the queen is given permission to do what she needs to do. And then as we read through into chapter 9, we're going to get into just how far the king wants to go to make sure to protect her people, to make sure that the right things are done, and to try to correct this problem. And he goes the extra mile for her, allows her to have a greater say. He asks her opinion. So look for those things as you come in to this chapter. So some of the, we've got these study questions, the digging deeper questions in the big kit. And some of those questions are things like, what sin is pointed out that I need to confess or to avoid? There's so much in Haman, right, for us to look at and to take. We can apply that personally to ourselves. Are we thinking too highly of ourselves than we ought? Are we putting our hope and our faith in all of these things that we've done instead of putting our trust and our faith in God? Are we deciding that position and riches and all of these other things, that's where our safety is? Especially, we've got a time going on right now where all of those things have been taken from us, right? There's so many of us that job situations are in question. Our money situation is up in the air. We don't still know what's going to happen, and it's still uncertain as to which direction things are going, right? Because things that are beyond our control are happening around us, and they're getting in our way of the things that we normally would do to put our heads down and do our jobs and just get busy. Well, how much of our fear is driven because we put our hope and our trust in those things and not as much in God, and that God will see to it that we're clothed, that God will see to it that we have what we need. We will have food to eat, we'll have clothes. He takes care of the birds. He takes care of the sparrows. He takes care of the grass, the lilies of the field. He takes care of them, and they are more beautifully arrayed than Solomon ever was in all of his grandeur. And if he does that for them, he takes better care of us. And this is a good time for us to evaluate really where our trust and our faith was. Have we been trusting God so long as everything is like so? Nowhere in Scripture does he promise that we get to keep the status quo. Nowhere in Scripture does he promise that financial abundance and growing to whatever heights we desire. He never promises that as a given. He tells you to whatever circumstance you're in to be content. If you have a lot, be thankful for it. Use it for the brotherhood and use it to further God's mission while we're here. But be content. You're not looking to just grab more and grab more to have more, because we don't want to be like the man that built the barns, right? But he says the same thing to those who are poor. You should be content with where you are, because you can still serve God even if you don't have all the riches that everybody else has. Well, how content are we? How satisfied are we to do what we can from where we are to the best of our ability today? God says it's good to plan, and we're supposed to work so as to take care of our family. Well, there's no guarantee that the work I did yesterday is the work I have to keep doing forever. Other things can be done, so just find other work. Look for it. It may take some effort on our part to find that work to fill that need, but we trust God along the way that if he's told us that's what ours to do, is he'll fill that void for us. Not by us sitting back on our haunches and doing nothing. Esther did something. She did something different than her normal day today, right? She did something, but she didn't look at it like, I'm going to walk in and tell the king I'm going to want to take command of his army. She didn't walk in and tell the king what a fool he was for listening to this man and allowing this law to be written. She didn't walk in with an air of, I'm going to fix this mess like everybody else. She walked in with an air of, it's my job to bring it to the attention of the one who can do something about it. I trusted the Lord with this. This is the position I'm in. All I can do is let the king know. That's just oozing around everything that she says. She doesn't demand anything. She doesn't demand what be done to Haman. None of that. She just tells him, I'm asking you to preserve my life, and I'm also asking that you would preserve my people. That's it. She doesn't go beyond that. She doesn't go beyond her reach. She trusts God that she'll have the strength to do what's hers to do, and then she trusts God that if the people are meant to be saved, he'll do it through the means available, which would be the king responding to her request. What that looks like, she doesn't know. But we can learn from Esther to approach each day with some humility and with a reminder that we are blessed with whatever we have today. Think about Paul, whether I have a little, abased, or abound, right? In all circumstances, this is how I am content. And that's the context in which he says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. It's not I can do anything I want because Christ is going to strengthen me to give me every dream I have. It's that no matter what my life looks like, I'm still strong because Christ is with me. That's the difference. And we need to remember that it's where God is going to take care of these things. His provision is there to protect us here and bring us to heaven. That's the promise that we have. And part of that promise is if you walk in my ways, you will be blessed. But we always have to remember that God's blessings they're not bound by man's wisdom. So we need to step back and look at Scripture and look at how God defines those blessings and make sure that that's how we define those blessings. There's a thought where Mordecai and Esther could be so frustrated. We're at the end of the 70 years of captivity. They're supposed to be heading back. Some people have already gone back. And they could be going, you've got to be kidding me. We're threatened again. We're supposed to be safe. How much is going to be left? How small is the remnant going to be? Why are we being threatened again? There's a whole lot of frustration they could have felt. We don't ever see any of that expressed here. The Jews are afraid for their lives and they're confused because of the difference. But then all of these events come into place and it's going to set up a circumstance where Mordecai and Esther can do everything in their power to not only support the Jews, but to help them beyond measure, and then to once again, in a foreign nation, they're going to be put into a position where God is given the glory and they are allowed to thrive where they are until such time as they get to go home. So it's very exciting. We've gotten the bad guy out of the way, and now we just have to deal with the aftermath and all of the mess, right? So chapter 8, you're going to spend, like I said, all week writing this. Pay attention to what the king says and what he asks. And then pay attention to what Esther says. And notice what she says here versus what she said at dinner. Right? See what the differences are, because her circumstances change. We go from dinner, where they're sitting at the table talking, and now we're making a formal request in chapter 8. She is before the king making a political, formal request. And how does that get handled, and what does she say? And then how does she respond with what she's given? What does she do with that? And it's interesting too to watch her and see if she changes or not as she's given some authority, as the king acknowledges her some. See how Esther responds, how she responds to these changes. So it's going to be another interesting week, and I hope that you enjoy that. But when you're going through and asking yourself these questions, in what ways can I apply this text to my life? I realize that the book of Esther is written, it's different than Proverbs. It's different even than the Gospels, where you basically have some commands and clear things that are written out in do this, don't do this, kind of a format, even when they're told to other people. This isn't told that way. But there's a lot of things that we can take from it. Take from Mordecai's humility, but also his conviction, and see how in the end God puts him in a position where he can do more for God. He stood up for God and he's able to do more, just like Daniel, just like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They stood their ground and they chose God first. And they refused to bow down in any way that would go against God. And while they went through a struggle, in the end, they were held up even higher, and it put them in a position to do more for God's people while they're here. We need to trust God that much, that if I just keep doing what he says, not, okay, well, he's told me to do this, but this is really hard right now, so when everything gets back to normal, then I'll do those things that way again. I'll put it off and then put it back on. We need to have the conviction just to keep on staying, even when it's hard, and do what's hard. After all, God did what was hard. Jesus did what was hard for us. And we need to remember that. That goes back to our Romans 12, 1 and 2. This is our just compensation. This is our righteous sacrifice. This is all that we need to give. A life has been given for us. Our life needs to be given in exchange. Live it. And don't be afraid to live it. You know, when there's a moment of concern, drop on your knees and pray and take it to God. Get back into his word. Dig in and see how godly people responded to difficult circumstances. Build your faith. Put that armor on and add layers to it. Don't just give up. Don't let fear get to you, because that's how Satan gets in. Don't give him an in. Make him have to stay over there, roaring as a lion, but not ready to attack because you're too strong. He can stand over there and yell at you and roar at you all he wants. Doesn't hurt you one bit. But if you lay down your guard and make it where he can get closer and can attack you, that's only going to happen if you put your armor off. Esther put her armor on, and she called on those who were like-minded with her to do it with her. And she was able to trust them, and look at what it's done for them so far. God's taken care of it. God's protected Mordecai. He's lifted him up despite everything Haman has tried to do. And Mordecai has come out the winner. So, hope we can put all of that into a place where we can use that, where we can use it to encourage our children, where we can encourage our spouses, where we can wake up encouraged as we go about our day, as wives, as women, as mothers, whatever we've got to do, that we give God the glory and we trust him with it, and we do what we can do from where we are with what we know today. And that's it. So, okay, it's not showing me. Let me see if there's any more comments on here. If y'all have something else that you want to say or point out, if I don't see it here, you're welcome to add to the video anytime. Yeah, it's not showing them to me over there now either. It's not showing me any new comments. So, but you're welcome to comment below. Hashtag live, hashtag replay if you come back and watch it again, or you're having to catch it later because you're not awake right now because you're on the other side of the world. But just share your comments with what you're learning from Esther, and not just what you see in her, but what you see that you can do now that you know that because of her example. How can you apply Esther in her example and Mordecai's example? How can you apply that to where you are right now? And any of that you can share throughout the week as you're going through the chapter, share that with others and help encourage them, build their faith, let them know they're not alone, that other people are going through the study. Guys, we've got about 1,000 people going through this study together right now. Between all the avenues, we've got some people going through it just on email, some people following it on Instagram, and then you guys over here. There's a lot of people who are going through this study right now, and you are not alone. They're all looking for the same encouragement that you are, and just keep reminding each other that you're out there, that they're not alone, and that God is here, and he's listening, and he's there to help you. So, have a good week, Lord willing. We'll see you again here next week, and hope that we will be here to talk about chapter 8 and all of the things that were done perfectly in God's provision to take care of the people. So we'll get set up for that, and then chapter 9 and 10 the week after that, and then we've got some exciting things in looking at, how to apply these things to ourselves going forward and how to take those lessons with us. So I will talk to you all then, and hope to see you along the page sometime during the week. Thank you so much for being here. Oh, you're welcome, Michelle. Thank you for being here. I'm always so thankful that you guys are here. It's encouraging to me, and this study has been very good and helpful for me, and I hope that it has been something of benefit for all of you as well. So we'll see you next week. Bye.